Hi, I'm Dr. Mountain. It's time to put away the puffy jackets and get ready for some warm weather. Today I'm going to be comparing two vehicles to help you have some more fun outside. Here we have my brand new 2021 Giant Fathom with 27.5-inch wheels. And here we have my 1998 Gary Fisher Big Sur. It's 23 years old and I've ridden this every year. I rode it last year many times in the mountain bike trails out around Calgary and Bragg Creek. As parts would break or fail over the years, I would replace them, usually with a higher end component. I replaced the rear derailleur, the brake levers, the suspension fork. The frame is original. There might be a couple other original parts. I think some of the bearings in the headset here are original. But other than that, the frame is original. And it's just been such a joy to ride, and I've loved putting new parts when I could onto the bike. But now it's 23 years old. It got to the point where, should I really put new parts on, or should I invest in a new mountain bike? This is the original 1998 bike catalog for Gary Fisher. Now Gary Fisher was bought out by Trek, and Gary Fisher line is no longer. He was a pioneer in mountain biking, and this is the original catalog. I still have it after all these years, and although different color, that was my bike. And at the time, I wrote down here, I paid $1,392 plus tax. And it was 26.5 pounds when I bought it. Actually, now my scale says I weighed it. I was able to get a pound off of it by upgrading some of the components. So fast forward 23 years, 2021, and we have the Giant Fathom, and technology has changed a lot. There's things you can't see, like these are tubeless tires, and that's supposed to save a little bit of weight. However, this bike is 3 pounds heavier according to my scale. It's 28.5 pounds. It's 3 pounds heavier than my Gary Fisher bike. And things you can see, for example, very wide bars, and yes, the bigger 27.5-inch wheels, and they're great. I have ridden several 29-inch wheels, and I think if you're racing and you really want to go fast, more in a straight line, I think they are better. In my opinion, I find the 27.5-inch wheels, and certainly the 26-inch wheels, they are more lively. It's just, in my opinion, a little bit more fun, but it doesn't really matter. I hedged my bets and I went for the 27.5, and I haven't ridden this one a lot yet. So we'll see as the year goes on, maybe I'll change my opinion. So here's an obvious technological advancement, is the gearing here on, this is the technology that SRAM brought out a lot, but now this is on Shimano too. So if you have a look here, this is now 12 speed. Now, if we compare that to my 23-year-old bike, now this is an 8 speed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it has 3 chain rings on the front, and that requires a shifter on the upper left handlebar, whereas the new bike only has the 1 chain ring. And then in place of the shifter, you get this dropper seat post. So if you press the button, seat post will go down, and then on demand on the trail, you can change the height. Okay, so here's another obvious difference. Are disc brakes, hydraulic disc brakes. So if we compare this to my 23-year-old bike, although these are strong, especially in dry conditions, these are rim brakes. These are V brakes, stronger than the older U-style, or forget the name of the older brakes. The trouble is that they grab on the rim. And so what happens, if you look here, when it's muddy, if you go through mud, if you get caught out in the rain, the braking surface is on the rim. So if this gets muddy, then it makes a lot of noise and it does not stop as well. Whereas disc brakes up here, here's the rim surface, the tire goes through the mud. This is kept up out of the muck and rain, and you get a lot more consistent braking. There is a considerable difference in the fork technology, although this fork here, the Marizaki BAM 80, it's 80 millimeter travel. It's an excellent fork for what it was intended to do as a cross-country fork. Inside it is an oil bath. It's up to these rubber seals. There's a specific fork oil that goes in there. And there are coil springs. They're about that long. They would go from here to here. To adjust the sag is the amount of that the forks will drop depending on the weight of the rider. These here, there's a dial on either side. These dials are turned to adjust the sag. Internally, I can use this tool. I have to take these caps the whole way off, and then I slide this down, and there's an internal adjustment for damping with the oil. It changes the rate at which the oil slides through, and that's really important when going over repeated bumps in a row. So oil and coil spring, and was an excellent fork for its day. It's still an excellent fork. This fork is an air fork. And so to adjust the sag for the rider weight, how much is the fork going to drop when I go on it? You would put air in there. This is where, that's a Schrader valve. That is where, it's not a coil spring anymore and it's not filled with oil. That's where you would put air in. This is a high pressure air pump that I would use. I haven't used it yet because I haven't ridden the bike enough to know if I want to change the sag or not. So this here, I love this switch. This adjusts the firmness. So as I turn it to firm, if I was climbing up a hill, let's say, or there weren't a lot of bumps, it makes it very, very stiff. Whereas as I turn it to open, then it's very, very squishy. So lots of travel if there was big bumps. So my older bike had an internal damping system. This here has an external. So if we look down here, so this is for rebound. That's the speed at which the fork will fly out after it's been compressed. Another design feature that's changed and improved compared to 23 years ago, it's actually a more recent change in the last, I don't know exactly, 5 or so years, is if you notice the head tube here, its diameter. I really like how this had gussets here. This is a very high stress spot. It made the frame stronger by having this extra weld here. But if you look at the thickness of that head tube, if we compare to the thickness of the head tube on the Giant, and not only that, it is tapered. And what that means is inside here, the steer tube that comes up and is clamped at the top, the steer tube is wider at the bottom and tapers up. And that means at the bottom where most of the force is from hitting bumps and all that kind of thing, going off drops, where the most pressure is on the frame, the steer tube is the widest. So it's a tapered steer tube. Very cool technology. Kind of gives you the best of both worlds versus running a great big thick steer tube the whole way up. It saves the weight and the space and keeps it narrow at the top where you don't need it as strong, and it's wider at the bottom where you do. One of my favorite pieces of technology on mountain biking is not new. It's been around for quite a few years, I think from the 1990s, is clipless pedals. There's a special shoe that clicks into here. There, I did it, and to get out, you pull your heel out. I really love clipless pedals. These I actually took from my other mountain bike. I've had them from when I first got the bike. They had clipless pedals. They give you more opportunity to give you more power around the whole circle. Your feet don't slip off and you don't get gouged by the spikes on a platform pedal. If you're gonna try clipless pedals for the first time, set the spring tension really low. There's a little minus and a plus, and you can turn it to the very, very soft spring setting, and it will allow you to basically take your foot straight out to the side. And then as you get used to it, then you can add a little bit more spring tension. If you're not racing, don't crank it all the way up, and it will let you escape when you need to. But man, that's one of my favorite pieces of technology. Of all the new technology, the dropper seat post is kind of fun too. And I'm getting used to not having a chainring on the front. That I'll be able to check in better with that at the end of the summer. For now, when I used to race a little bit, it was nice to just shift that left shifter and have a big jump change in gearing. And now we don't have that anymore. You got to click, 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 click all through the gears to change your gearing, but it works, and it does give you that, free up that space to use the dropper post. So I think it's probably a worthwhile trade-off. One of the other significant differences between this 23-year-old bike and this brand new bike is the geometry. Now, we couldn't get a camera angle here that you can really see, but there's significant differences between the geometry. This older bike, the blue one here, it has quite lively geometry, very short chain stays and a very steep head angle. And I really enjoyed that about it. I think it made it very lively, and I actually think it made me a slightly better motorcycle rider because I learned to be gentle with steering. This newer bike has significantly steeper head tube angle. It does change the geometry because the fork travel is so much longer, but I did pick it because it was a bit more conservative than some of the mountain bike brands, which are getting very long and slack to make them extremely stable at high speeds, which is great. I think, in my opinion, it might take a tiny bit of the fun away from, a bit of the liveliness away from the feel and the ride of the bike, but that's just my opinion, and my experience might change over the course of the summer. I might really learn to love this new geometry. In my little bit of riding experience on this new bike so far, it does feel quite different, and that's okay. Different is okay. The availability of new bikes is a little bit of a challenge for bike shops right now. As soon as this came available, I went down to Cochrane and got it. I've been researching it for some time, and $1,600. So it's quite fascinating that for only a couple $100 more, I get all this new technology than I paid 23 years ago. So bikes are still really good value. That's my classic cross-country bike. I put many kilometers on this old bike. Still love it after all these years. Well, I'm gonna go try my new bike now. Such a fun ride. Now this is a great bike too. You know what though, whatever bike you have, it doesn't matter. Just get out, ride it within your capability. I can feel differences when I ride down. I know it's a very easy trail, but ride within your capability and just have fun. Get out there. So please check out some of my other videos if you have time. Making videos is a way to bond with my cameraman, my son, and he helps me on my YouTube content, but my priority is always to my practice here in Airdrie, and this is sort of a hobby, fun thing to do, but it really does line up with the doctor as teacher in my oath as a naturopathic doctor. I just love to teach people and expose people to new ways of thinking about things. So I really like to make these videos, so please like and subscribe.